So this here was my first workbench. I made a few mistakes when I designed it, so it's now wobbly as hell. And since I now got a table saw that needs a stand to sit on, well, it's time to make a new bench. Now before I start on this week's video, I'd like to thank everybody who commented on my last week's video on learning to TIG weld. Thanks for all the excellent advice you guys have been giving me. I've been doing a practice session every single day, getting a few decent beads down, but still got a long way to go. Thanks a lot. So what do I like about the old bench that I want to keep? The size is good. My wood shop's a kind of narrow and small room. This is the record vise which I got off eBay a few years ago. I really like it. I want to keep it, but I do want to move it to the other end of the bench. People say right-handers should have their vise on the left-hand side, but I kind of prefer it on the other side. I like dog holes for mounting weird and unusual crap against, but I don't really need 3 rows of them. I'll probably just put 2 in the vise and then 2 rows down this end, well, the other end, the vise end, but also put some along the length. The main issue I've got with this bench is the wobbliness, and the reason for that is I thought I was being clever. There's no like pinned joints or mortises or anything. I just routed grooves into the upper and lower side of these stretchers and then ran all thread all the way through, figuring that I could put the wood under compression and therefore it would stay nice and rigid. Of course, what happens is the wood just compresses out of the way and gets loose, and you can tighten them and then they get loose again immediately. So that was not a great plan. The new one I'm going to do with mortise and tendon joints. Hopefully that'll last a bit longer. Now, I've been storing all of my power tools under the bench using a system which I call mess. There's always a heap of dust and stuff under here. I probably won't do anything initially with like drawers and stuff, but I probably will make some sort of drawers in the future. Another thing I like about this is that I made it out of the old boxing timber used for concreting a wall in my house. It doesn't matter, you know, I don't want a fine piece of furniture made out of beautiful high quality timber that I then have to care about too much. And I must say I do like my unicorn. My daughter was only 10 when she painted this for me. I like the eyelashes. Maybe once I've finished with it, I'll cut it out and put it on the wall. So I whipped up a quick design for my bench here in FreeCAD. The idea being that this is my table saw. I don't really have space in this workshop to put a separate stand for the saw, so I'll integrate it. Here's where I'm going to put my bench vise. The frame's going to be all 75 by 75 or 3 by 3 inch timber. I want mortise and tenon joints at all of these interfaces. You sort of see the different framing up underneath. Right, let's go and prepare some wood, shall we? I've had a number of these 2x12s for a number of years now. Mostly I only use them for ramps when I need to do an oil service on my car, and I only need 2 of them. Otherwise, the last time I used them all was to make a crane for taking the maho down off the trailer, and that was years ago. So I think it's a good idea to recycle them. Okay, so now I've ripped them into lengths. The next step I need to make is just to cut out the bits that are usable, and the scrap wood that's knotty goes on the firewood pile. So next up, all of this wood is going to need jointing. Jointing means flattening one side and flattening a second side exactly 90 degrees to it. Okay, now with 2 sides nicely jointed, so they're flat and square, the next task is to set up the thickness planer. Now Then we'll bring the third side down parallel with the first. Now unfortunately I got so carried away with all of the planing and jointing that I overheated the bearings in the worm drive, chewed out the plastic teeth on the worm wheel. So I've now ordered all the components to get in here and just replace this sort of half-assed drive system with an independent stepper motor. So until the ordered parts arrive, I can still use the jointing function up top, but I can't use the thicknessing function. Now you probably can't see that this clearly, but I've just drawn an outline for a pusher to push wood through the saw. So let's chop that out. Alright, and there we have it. The last job is to cut that last side. And the easiest way of doing that is with a table saw. I've found that even ripping at the maximum extension of the blade, which is about 80 millimeters, I still get very good repeatability. So here I'll just set it for 40 millimeters. And I seem to have nailed it within a tenth easily. And even with that rather coarse ripping blade, the surface finish is good enough that probably a couple of licks with a hand plane or one pass over the jointer at a very fine feed will clean that up with a very nice finish. Now the saw should be able to get me to dimension and square. Once I've jointed up a bunch of pieces, I'll just put them once more through the thicknesser and that should be it. Okay, after a whole lot of milling of timber, I've got enough for all the framing done as well. Everything's been made with 80 by 40 millimeter timber, and I'll laminate two strips together for legs and stuff and all the rest of the framing. Just doing all the glue up now. Now out of all of that wood which I cut, there is this one single piece which may be aircraft grade timber. Now I'm not a specialist for wood and aircraft, but the requirements for structural aircraft wood like spars and longerons and things like that, it's got to be quarter sawn timber, so you get the growth rings going pretty much vertically this way. There are requirements for the number of growth rings per inch. There are requirements on grain run out, so as the growth rings run out into the edge of the board. Obviously no knots. You can see there's a bit of a pitch pocket through there that may be beyond limits. So out of all of that wood, this is as close as I've seen to a board that would be usable for an aircraft structural part. And that one usable board is only 1.5 meters long. You could probably get one fin spar out of this. Out of 6 12 by 2s, one little fin spar. So this is going to be one of the bottom stretches. It's going to be the one at the front. All of this timber is going to be the tabletop. I went through all of them and just ran a hand plane along them in both directions to decide which way was the right way for the grain. And I've marked them all with the same direction so that once it's all laminated up and glued together, I can flatten the top by just planing in a single direction. Now from my original ideal that I was going to cut out all the knots and all the nasties, just have as good a grain timber as I could get, well, that's not really possible. So I'll be laminating this with this at the bottom of the slab, somewhere in the middle. I'll get a largely defect-free top, like a couple of little bits like this will probably stay in it. So the next thing I'm going to need to do is cut all my framing timber to length and start cutting all the mortise tongues on the end. I'll be using the crosscut saw for that, but just to make sure I get the length right, I'll put an end stop on it using the fence. And here I'll put the fence in the outboard position. So I can move out to the first dimension I need is 570 millimeters. I guess once the sled's on here, that little support doesn't really help. So before I start cutting my framing timber to length, quickly go do a very light skim over the jointer just to clean up the glued faces. I really like this. It's super easy to set up. Now the other leg. You know, I think this blade might be a bit too coarse for cross-cutting, so let's switch it out. The blade which I'm going to switch in is going to be this one. It's quite a bit smaller diameter, it's only 190 millimeters versus 250, but I bought it as a nice fine tooth cross-cutting panel saw. Now the saw's arb is 16 millimeter, but all these blades have got a 30 millimeter hole. So there's a feature on here, a centering feature. If you don't get that centered correctly and you clamp it off like this, bad things happen. Ask me how I know. So it's hand tighten the blade, rotate it, make sure it's running nice and concentrically, and then tighten it. Okay, that's a problem. Okay, so I can't use this blade as is because the thickness of the blade is thinner than that boss sticks up. So I'd either need a different boss or centering rings and just a flat clamping ring. Okay, to make this work, I just whipped up a quick thin washer or shim that'll allow the whole sandwich to clamp. Right, let's do a test cut. Yeah, that's definitely a finer cut. Okay, since I'm going to be doing mortise and tenon joints on all the corners and all the stretches, all the spreaders, everything, I've got a lot of them to cut. So I've set up a stop block and set the height of my blade. Already done a test cut to make sure those are okay. So let's get at it. Okay, that's a bummer. In my excitement for cutting tenons into everything, I cut two in the top of the short legs which go underneath the saw. They're supposed to only have mortises in the end. So I'll have to make up two more short legs. Although I was trying to avoid it, I did have to buy one stick of wood. It's just 3x3. I found the nicest piece I could get at the hardware store, and I'll cut the legs out of the nicest section I can find. I think I designed this bench with 24 mortise and tenon joints. Now the tenons are very easy to cut, but the mortise is a bit more work. I think the easiest way to do these is to first rough out most of the wood with a Forstner bit. Next up, I just use a chisel to take out the worst of it. I made a routing guide to clean it up. There's a line there which I need to line up with the cap. A while ago I turned up this guide bushing so I can use that to guide around here. I'll first go around once at just this level, and then I'll plunge each of the four corners. And the last bit's just a bit of cleanup to get these corners square. Just need to take these little lips off. You know that whole measure twice, cut once thing? Probably would have been a good idea on this project, because this mortise belongs here. I have no idea how I ended up putting it in the wrong spot, but it was of course my single best piece of wood that I did it to. I'll make up a close fitting plug and try and match the grain and see how close I can get it. You could call that a lightning hole, I guess. After what seems like an eternity of cutting mortises, it's time for the final glue up. I'll just start with the two sides of the frame first, glue those together, let them dry overnight, and then I'll put the spreaders in to spread the two sides apart. Right, while this is all easily accessible, I'll just do a wee bit of cleanup on there. Since this is the outside, the bit that you're going to see. Right, just need to plane that whoopsie I did back into shape. Probably should have done this before I glued it all together, then I could have taken nice long planing strokes, but I was in a hurry. I had fantasies of getting this finished in time for this week's video. Wonder if that'll happen. I think it's time to do the other side. You know, I've looked at quite a few videos from YouTube woodworkers lately. It always looks like their joints meet up perfectly with absolutely no step whatsoever. I don't quite achieve that standard yet, not even close. So I have to plane them in. You know, I don't really remember that much about my dad's dad. When I was a little kid, they lived a long way away from us, and he passed when I was pretty young. But my only memory was getting a real bollocking from him because I was sitting on a concrete step, planing the step with his wood plane. I must have been like 4 or so. Just break those edges a little. It's just done a dry run to make sure all the spreaders are going to fit. So it's time to glue them in. Must be time for a bit of a layup, I guess. Looks like my plan must have changed somewhere along the way, because this is 670 millimeters. But I built the frame closer to 690. Luckily I've still got this piece left over, so I'll just whack a couple of centimeters out of that. Okay, I think I've now got everything set up and ready to go. So this all dried overnight. Quick plane down. Right, well after a rough planing on both top and bottom, I'm now ready to cut one end to length. take it to the full depth of what the saw does, which is I think 70 millimeters on the track. So I can't get all the way through. This table's about 76 millimeters. Now I need the base on upside down to work out where to locate the mortise cuts for these top tenons. Damn, this is all getting heavy. Mail time. That's good. Tungstens to cut down on the number of times I have to do the walk of shame to the grinder. You know, when you're getting a bit older, you need a 4-pack of reading glasses, so I can distribute them all through the shop. And lastly, a bit of filler wire. Comes in a pretty cool container. Now to tie the tabletop to the base, my instinct would be just to glue the thing. But last time I did that, all the woodworkers of the world screamed at me that you can't do it because of thermal expansion or moisture expansion or something cracks and the whole thing falls apart. So I'll route in a few little slots and then use cleats to mount the top. That won't work. Oops, that was ugly as. Forgot that you should always conventionally cut, not climb cut. So that it doesn't come crashing down on me as soon as I take out that last bolt, just clamp this T-section in. So you can see the simple quick change mechanism. The thread itself has got this very asymmetric buttress thread, where the flanks are vertical on the loaded side but highly tapered on the other. This lever just lifts the nut out of the thread. And then you're back in. Works really nicely. Now this vise does need a riser block. I found a piece of thick ply marked off the holes, so let's drill those. So next I'll make up some captive bolts out of all thread. Cool, I get to use my new TIG welder on a woodworking project. Dope. Dope. Bugger. Well, that one's a bit prettier than the first one. Not again. Got plenty of sharpening to do when I walk to the grinder of shame. I'm really not on my game today. Every time I'm taking the argon away straight away. Before I can finalize the location of that vise here, I need to square up this end. So the fixture of the vise is going to need a cutout. So I'm going to need to cut this whole area all away. You know, in hindsight, with a bit of planning, I could have cut that board before I even laminated it up. Oh well. Right, well that was the very last operation I need to do on the bottom, so I'll give it a quick sand down. I'm not going to bother bringing this up to a very high finish because it's only the bottom. As you can see, I still haven't got around to casting a positive image of this, which would then be right way around. I'll use this brand to give it a mark. Because it's easier to do this now than later, I'll just give this bottom side a coating of shellac. Shellac's a really good adhesive, especially for shellac lids. Okay, I think I'm now ready for final assembly. Looks like I'm going to have to pack up the saw a little bit until I've got the table bolted down and extend these slots through into this table. I have to use the back side of the sled. Now I need to make up a chuck jaw. Judging by how asymmetric this is, I suspect that I changed my plan halfway through. Do remember deciding not to cut the vice cut out all the way to the leg because I didn't want to cut into the mortise joint by the leg. Mail time. Alright, I've been using this Surui, I don't know. I've been using this fluid head for my video work for about the last 2 years, I guess. The VA5 model. Unfortunately, a while ago, it broke and no longer locks. Don't know why. Maybe I wore it out. I contacted Surui to ask them whether they'd have some sort of a repair kit for me, because I'd happily pull it apart, repair it, and put it back into service, but they decided to send me a replacement unit instead. So while it was out of service, I've been using a ball head on my studio stand, and ball heads don't work that great for video. It's always more difficult to get the alignment right. So thanks for the warranty replacement on that, Surui. Good support. Okay, well that's the fixture finished. Ready to be installed. Now the moving jaw. So the last piece I need to make are the cleats to hold the table down. So I've just whipped up this profile on the table saw and now chopped that into 50mm 2-inch lengths. There'll be 4 of those to hold it together. Well, the last thing to do is just finish off this top. It's looking pretty flat on that diagonal. Wee bit of a hollow on that diagonal, but looks like I need to take down that end just a little more than the rest. I think I'll do that with sander. Alright, quick sanding between layers. I just realised I forgot to put the dog holes in this. Right, no job's finished until the tools are put away. And until cleanup's done. I still need to do something with the old bench, but I'll probably just cut it up and burn it for firewood. So there we go. That's kind of main body of the table finished for now. Having worked with it for the last couple of days, it seems super sturdy. I hope the joints stay nice and rigid. And the saw's now at a really comfortable height to work at. Now, I know this is not a fine, beautiful piece of furniture, but it'll pick up the scars from each of the projects I make, pick up a patina, and I kind of like that. It's a workbench. Thanks for watching.